Hi, this is Ren,
And this is Casey.
and this is All Walks of Film.
Triple feature, episode 1.
Today we're talking about Nazi films and the Nazis' oppression of Jews.
During World War II. So we're not talking about any other aspects in World War II.
Yeah, so no Japanese versus the United States, none of what went on in the Philippines, no storming of Normandy, none of that stuff. We're just talking about Nazi-occupied Germany.
And other places.
You're right, and other places.
But Nazi-occupied.
Nazi-occupied and the Nazis' oppression of Jewish people.
Right. And we actually picked the most widely discussed aspect of World War II in media. Not just in Hollywood, I guess, but most World War II movies, books, TV shows are talking about Nazi Germany. And I think a big part of the reason why Americans talk about that a lot, like in American culture, is to take our eyes away from our actions during World War II. So we don't talk about internment camps, the Japanese internment camps on American soil. We don't talk about the bombing of Japan or anything like that.
But also, to be fair, a lot of people who have come, a lot of people in the United States who have made these films, couple of them weren't from this aspect, but there are several people who came to the United States and were ancestors of people who...
No, I understand.
I mean, sorry, not ancestors,
not...
but they descended from people who actually fled from Germany.
Right, and it's not incorrect for it to be talked about so much. I just think that's part of the reason why it is.
Yeah.
From my experience dealing with Americans talking about history of war, a lot of things get glossed over that America did. It's in particular the Veterans Day March that happens in Austin. They sort of go through it era by era, the different wars, starting with the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. But they skip over a lot of wars that happened, including the Civil War. They don't really talk about the Civil War.
Is that because they don't want to...
like, drag American deeds in the mud sort of deal.
Yeah.
But...
well, that's
a separate issue, but
yeah.
I kind of just wanted to bring it up. I personally think that's why. Nazis are kind of a go-to bad guy. Which comes up both against that idea and for that idea in two different movies we talked about.
But two of the films that we're talking about actually portray the Nazis in a more humanizing way than our third movie.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But our three movies in this order are Schindler's List, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and Inglorious Basterds. Yes.
With the emphasis on the E, because there is actually another film called Inglorious Basterds, and it's actually nothing like Inglorious Basterds, so it's not a remake whatsoever. Right. The title's similar, but seriously, they share nothing in common. And I'll talk about that later.
Okay. Alright, well, our first one was Schindler's List, made in 1993 by Steven Spielberg.
Yes, and Steven Spielberg is a Jewish American.
Right.
So the plight of the Jews in Germany was something that was very dear to him. In fact, the first film that he made... this was a student project, was called Amblin, which his film company is based off of, was a film about Nazi-occupied Germany. Steven Spielberg, made Duel. He became successful making Jaws and Close Encounters, E.T. And in 1993... he had the audacity to make two, not only very successful, but two masterpieces in the same year.
Entirely different.
entirely different movies. You have, on one hand, Jurassic Park, which is a movie that holds up today.
Yeah, it's one of those movies along with, I would say, it's Jurassic Park and Toy Story for me, are the two where you look at it today and it's still mind-blowing. Like, mind-blowing.
Right. I mean, some of the CG stuff with the Brachiosauruses don't work as well today, but for the most part, yes.
Well, that's because there really was... Jurassic Park was the big CGI leap, but there wasn't that much CGI in it.
No.
There were 16 shots with CGI in it in that movie.
Only 16?
Only 16, and then they're longer shots. I'm not saying like 16 frames or anything crazy, but there's not that much. Most of it was practical effects. Most of it was animatronics, puppets, that sort of thing. And even the CGI figures were based on stop-motion animated figures.
Okay.
So that kind of adds to their realism. But there's... That one's just the big thing because that was the first big boom besides Young Sherlock Holmes.
Well, going back to the other film, which is Schindler's List, much different film in every single aspect.
Yeah.
And I think Steven Spielberg needed to have some kind of break from Schindler's List, because Schindler's List is a painful movie to get through versus Jurassic Park, which is mostly fun.
Right. Yeah, and you told me that you thought of this movie as sort of a half documentary, which was really interesting.
Well, the movie has intertitles throughout that explain the setup, which is something that most movies do not do. Even movies based on real stories don't give a full setup. And throughout the movie...
They usually do one at the beginning and one at the end.
Right.
They have like an opening blurb, they do the movie, and then they have a closing blurb. Right.
And although the story revolves around the humanitarian, the businessman asshole turned philanthropist humanitarian,
right.
Oscar Schindler, but it actually revolves around the lives of these Jewish people, and the stories that are told in the movie are actually based on interviews, and the people that show up at the end of the film are the people that told the stories.
Based on the interviews of 22 real people.
Okay. Yeah, 22 real people were interviewed for the film and...
featured by their actual names.
Okay. Yeah, and at the end of the film, when they're walking to Oscar Schindler's grave, they're holding hands with the actor that played them.
Right. So it's the actual person who was interviewed and their filmic representation.
Yes.
Which I thought was really the most touching part of the movie. It somehow was entirely cohesive. If that makes sense. It could possibly have come off as really awkward to have something that's fabricated, all based in reality, but it's all stylized and set up, all actors and sets, but then you have all of a sudden, the real people, but somehow it never felt disjointed or disconnected, it just felt continuous.
Yes, and whereas in all reality, it's a scene that breaks the fourth wall completely.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, the audience is totally into it because we know going in that Oscar Schindler is a real person.
Right, and we know most of it, with the exception of one specific aspect, is based on reality.
Right, and
But not just vaguely, oh, we kind of know these events happened, but very specific personal stories.
Right.
But the one thing you had told me was the thing that he had said. If you want to bring it up.
Okay, so there is one scene in the film that breaks reality. It didn't happen, and that was near the end where Oskar Schindler invites the Nazi officers to, finish their job and kill the Jews in the factory. He's not really taunting them, but he's trying to explain how family is important and they should go, and if they think their jobs are so significant to do that. So dramatically it works, but
that was entirely fabricated.
That was entirely fabricated, yes.
Yeah. But you have essentially a line. You have more or less one line, one moment in a full 3-hour movie. And of course there are certain stylistic touches.
Right.
And certain sort of vague creative licenses, but essentially it's fairly truthful.
Yeah, I think the ring scene might have also been fabricated.
Was it though? I don't know.
To some extent.
Yeah.
But
I don't know.
Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. It seemed plausible.
Yes, it was a very plausible scene.
Yeah, it didn't seem too outlandish. It totally seemed doable.
But then again, nothing in this movie seemed too outlandish other than human atrocity.
Yeah. And the little girl in the red coat, not a bad thing by any means. That was a great visual metaphor. But nobody told them, oh, and there was this one little girl in a red dress. You know what I mean?
No, that is totally a stylistic choice, a stylistic scene.
Yeah, but it's fantastic.
And I can't really name any movie before Sin City that had black and white with just a clothing item in color before in a movie.
I don't believe that's true.
There's probably one.
Georges Méliès did that.
I'm not talking about color tinting. I'm talking about actually for stylistic reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And I'm also not talking about the scene in the 1920s, the black and white silent film, The Phantom of the Opera. There's a colored there's a colored scene, and that's how it was presented in the theater.
Right. There was one scene in color,
yeah.
But that was a full scene, correct?
Well, yeah,
ish to the best of their abilities.
To the best, it's amazing.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But the visual metaphors in the film were really great. One of the most impactful, obviously, is the little boy in the camp is trying to hide because they're taking the kids away. And he's looking around for places. He can't find it. And he's looking in the most horrible places, like ovens. And finally, he goes down into the toilet in a pile of shit. And other kids are saying he can't be there. This kid is literally sitting in shit and there's no room for him. That's one of the best uses of a visual metaphor in film to kind of get away with something awful and disgusting but totally works and is meaningful on like a more emotional level.
But given the fact that he was actually holding hands with the older version of himself, I do believe that that's actually based on...
I believe that's based on reality as well.
Holy crap. I
believe that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Holocaust. I mean, horrible things happened, and people did whatever they could to survive.
Yeah.
So, we start out, there's a businessman and a Nazi sympathizer, Nazi supporter, who sees all these Jews being put up in camps, and he decides, hey, cheap labor, heck yeah.
I think that was actually slightly before the camps. I think this was before the camps when they were taking businesses away from Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
There was a movement where Nazis were specifically taking away business and enterprises from their Jewish owners.
Oh yeah, so
there were all these out of work Jewish people.
Right, and him and Itzhak Stern, played by Ben Kingsley, had a business agreement where Oskar Schindler would run everything. Mm-hmm. Like he would own the business, but Itzhak Stern would actually run the business.
Exactly. Oscar was mostly putting up money and just making sure things kind of happened or were okay.
Right. And outside of the circumstances, that is a horrible thing to do. Right. Even inside the circumstances, while you watch it, you're just going, dude,
and
asshole.
He was fairly unsympathetic to begin with.
Right. I mean, he would, like at the very beginning, he like hooked up with that chick right in front of his wife. Like,
I wasn't even talking about that. I was talking about the old man who didn't have an arm. He got super pissed about that.
By the way, don't ever do that to me again.
Go, drive, don't bow.
Did you happen to notice that man had one arm?
Did he?
Because Itzhak Stern was just trying to give him a job and help him out a little bit.
Well, to be fair, that is kind of a circumstance where that is drawing attention.
Right.
That is drawing attention to yourself, like, oh, we're just picking anybody.
Yeah, and that's what he was afraid of, but he got really upset about it.
So, as the film progresses, we learn more about the actual people that are in the camps. Mm-hmm. And then we are introduced to Amon Goth. I'm probably butchering this name, but he's an asshole. So, but
yeah. And he was fascinating. He was so evil, but he was fascinating.
He was human. He was a horrible person.
Uh-huh.
But Ray Fiennes plays him so well that I believe that person exists.
Yeah.
He's not playing a caricature. Mm-hmm. He's playing a fully formed human being. A horrible human being, but a fully formed. There are times where he has struggles with his own morality, but there are other times where he's just sitting on
his patio,
sitting on his
people for fun.
Yeah, just for fun. Well, I don't even know if it was fun.
It wasn't exactly fun. He wasn't like maniacal about it. It was more for I want to say it was closer to recreational.
Yeah,
like it was almost like fishing.
Yeah,
like that. Human
life did well. Let me be clear: Jewish human life did not mean anything to him.
Yeah, but it wasn't even like hunting, where where the tension rises and you focus, like you put all your focus and attention and energy into being so still and really getting the shot. It's more like fishing, where you just sit there and you just hook a fish and throw it in your boat and you hook another fish. Like just that passive.
Right. And Amon and Schindler oftentimes were paralleled together in the film to show completely different sides. And there were times where they were level with each other, but the way they were positioned on screen, and one of the fortunate things is Liam Neeson is very tall.
Right.
So he was always morally and physically higher than Amon.
And you had heard that interesting thing about the girl in the red coat.
Yes. So during the scene where the girl's in the red coat, all violence is committed every time she disappears off screen. If you follow it, as soon as she leaves the screen, then you have Jews being shot on the wall. You have you'll see bodies, but I don't believe that you actually see any deaths during that. When she is literally in frame.
Right.
Within the scene you see death, but you don't see her in frame.
Which is interesting. You're basically telling me that she's a banshee, where she's sort of the precursor to death and violence. Because in folklore, a banshee is a female figure that appears right before someone's about to die. So she's sort of like a visual signifier.
Right, but...
Or like the calm before the storm.
Right, and within the context, that is the person that changes Schindler.
Yes.
He sees her while he's on his horse with his wife, and that girl moves him, and he changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And later in the film, you see her hood.
Right. You see that she died.
Yes.
Because you see her in a wheelbarrow being pulled over to a mass grave.
Yes.
What do you think that signified in the film?
Human atrocity, genocide. You can trivialize these moments, but the minute you start involving kids,
Mm-hmm.
that's when people link on.
Right.
You could kill 100 adults, but the minute a kid dies, that's when.
Right, but did that signify a change in his character, or a change in the plot?
I mean, it was.
Was that right before he started his list?
Oh, that was much before.
Much before, so it wasn't connected, right?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the next scene.
No, it wasn't the next scene. But if she's the character who changes Schindler when she dies, that probably directly pivots him into another direction.
I wish we did this podcast right after we watched that, because I can't remember if the scene right after that is when he makes the list.
Mm.
I don't know the exact pinpoint of that, so I'm not going to bite my tongue or say something that isn't synchronous in the film.
Okay. I don't really know how to even look it up or anything either.
Well, you just have to watch it over again.
Yeah, just watch the entire 3 hours again for that one moment. Sure.
So, what was your overall takeaway? I saw this movie when I was 12.
Right.
And I was actually doing a project on Steven Spielberg, talking about his films and him as a filmmaker. And when I was interested in films, the go-to director at the time was Steven Spielberg.
Right.
And he's still a go-to director, but not as much as he was.
He's not
in
the
the
contemporary 90s. Go-to filmmaker.
Right. But he's still probably in the top 5 go-to directors for really people that aren't as familiar with films as, film students or cinephiles.
Right. For me, I always I'm more invested in true story movies if I know for a fact this much and this much and this much was reality. Not just one of those loose, like, inspired by true events. Not like that. But if I know for a fact all this stuff that was said is actually true and was pulled from this document or whatever.
I've seen a lot of films.
That impacts me a lot more.
I've seen a lot of films that play with that, and I'm okay with that. Like, for instance...
No, but I'm saying it hits a different emotional core.
Right.
It's different. And there was so much painstaking care to be so accurate.
Yeah.
Which I feel is deserved. It's too recent an event to really mess around with that much in certain respects. I said that about the Godzilla movie that came out this year.
Well, there is
anti-Schindler's List. Just fuck up history.
Yeah.
But this movie had so much. It wasn't just attention to detail. It was care.
Right.
There was so much care in the script, in the planning, in the production, in the performances, and such a connection with the actual people who are still alive. There was so much of that it sort of transcends the film for what it is.
Right.
Being a masterpiece that it is anyways, it becomes almost like another entity, almost.
Right. And
that might be overhyping it a little bit, but that's how I personally feel.
And just as a forewarning before we get carried on into our next, we are going to spoil all 3 films.
Well, of course.
And I'm going to spoil the next one really soon. So
right.
If you don't want to be spoiled with Boy with the Striped Pajamas,
actually,
please...
before we move on to that, related to Schindler's List a little bit, I had given Ren some homework to read the Mouse series, which he owns. He owns on his bookshelf and hasn't ever read. And his assignment before this podcast was to read them, and he did not do that at all. Shame on you, mister.
Yeah.
Shame on you, mister.
Oh, I haven't read some.
Yeah, so please shame him into reading it. Not really. Please don't shame him. That's not cool. But I've done enough shaming for the whole internet.
Well, the semester has started, which still isn't a total excuse, but I do have a school semester that started, and I've spent a decent amount of time. If you look on YouTube, I have edited all the videos.
I know. But just Mouse is sort of the graphic novel almost sibling to Schindler's List in that it is the retelling of, like, a very specific retelling from the accounts of a survivor of the Holocaust. So they're almost like sibling pieces in different mediums.
Right.
But obviously Mouse is not as involved because Art Spiegelman wrote this 2-volume graphic novel about his father. And it's mostly solely from his perspective, in a sense. But that movie was more interesting because Schindler's List was entirely in this one time period. And Mouse deals with what happened during the Holocaust. But also you see, between the father and son dynamic, what's happened since then because of the Holocaust, if that makes sense.
Right. And the only thing that happens in Schindler's List is you see the candle in color, and then it goes to black and white. You have the film, and then the candle is lit again, and the color is brought back to the film, and then you have the characters at the end. Which
I really enjoyed as almost like almost a palate cleanser before and after of you're in this world and now we're going back. And then just a sort of gentle, and now we're back to reality. It's very gentle.
Well, not back to reality. Now we're back to...
Well, we're back to our current lives.
Right.
But it's such a gentle bringing you in and bringing you out.
And unfortunately, I don't know enough about Judaism to know if there is... Which I do believe there is actually a spiritual...
Yes, there is.
There's a spiritual significance.